Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Rhonda Seelinger, and I am the Customer Engagement Manager for iClicker. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We really do appreciate and value your time. We're going to get started in just a moment. Before we do, I just have a couple of quick announcements. The first, and you probably just heard that, everyone is in listen-only mode, and we do this just to help keep out background noise. That doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you, because we definitely do. And how we typically communicate is using either the chat or the question areas to ask questions and share comments. And you're encouraged to do that at any point throughout the presentation, as I do monitor both of those areas, and we will do our best to answer any questions and address any comments that you might have. Also, I want to let you know that we are recording today's webinar, and we will send a link to you shortly afterwards, like within the next day or so. We do archive all of our webinars on the iClicker.com website, so you are welcome to access any past webinars as well as look at future ones that we have planned. So we hope you can check that site out. And with those things covered, I am very pleased to introduce our guest speaker, Ray Villanueva. He is a lecturer in the Department of Anthropology at the University of Texas at San Antonio, where he is also a doctoral student in anthropology. Ray, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Hey, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Rhonda, for that great introduction, and thank you all for joining me this afternoon. It seems like it's warming up around the country, so that's always nice after these long, cold winters. So, as Rhonda mentioned, my name is Ray Villanueva, and I'm a doctoral student and lecturer in anthropology here at the University of Texas at San Antonio. Before I say anything else, I've been asked to remind you that my views are my own. I do not represent UTSA or the University of Texas system. That being said, let's get started. So I want to thank you all for being here. My goal here is to kind of briefly talk about using iClicker Cloud to gamify your class and engage your students. So this title is kind of constricting in a couple of ways, in that I'm primarily going to be showing you the way I've figured out using games in the iClicker system, and I fully rely on the iClicker Cloud platform that my university has adopted. And we'll talk about some of the ways and restrictions that that creates and ways to get around that for your own classroom. So my objectives for this afternoon are, first, to discuss the intent behind iClicker-based games and their use, to describe in detail how I use iClicker in the class, and finally, we're going to wrap up with some suggestions and best practices for gamifying your own classroom. So first comes first is, when do we use a game? I think for most of us, we know the best times tend to use it comes as a unit review or an exam review, but I also tend to do it in place of a quiz as well. And we'll talk about why briefly. It also becomes a question of why should we gamify in the first place? So in several of the courses that I teach here at UTSA, we are given practicing standards from the Higher Education Board. And several of these include communication, teamwork, and critical thinking. Over time, I still believe that gamifying the classroom is one of the best ways to bring these out in a way that we can keep the course minimized, and that we do these activities once or twice, 3 times a month or semester, keep the students interested, as well as get valuable data for ourselves and impactful and meaningful relationships with our students. And of course, the most important reason when it comes down to teaching and gamification is that it's something different, that a lot of the times we just need to break up the monotony of the classroom. We've done some lecturing, we've done some videos. It's something different, and generally students will enjoy it. So, some ways that I use iClicker. I need to preface things first that I only have students use the app, the Reef app, exclusively. And this allows for a wider variety of question types, including and especially the use of short answer and target questions. I also, when playing games, have my students work in groups. This is from personal observation and anecdotal evidence that it really appears to up the competitiveness of the exercise as a whole, and it makes students want to win. So briefly, I'm going to show how I set it up using the iClicker Cloud platform. So I don't tend to use the participation bar, so I keep that at 0. And when playing games, I tend to almost always have correct answer points listed as 5. And I always have the countdown turned on, the timer. This allows us to go through more questions in the allotted class time. I do believe, especially in any form of a game, but especially in iClicker and digitally based games, you need to have very clear instructions on the PowerPoint. So just for the way I configure my games, I show this PowerPoint slide exactly as is. I tell them to get into teams of roughly 5 individuals. I ask them to choose one person to be the representative, and only that person can answer. They will only answer through the Reef app, and all teams that get the answers right will get points. This is because if you're grading things within the iClicker platform, within the short answer platform, it's easier to have everything as same value so that you can just move on and let iClicker do the totals for you. And I always like to say teams with the most points win. I primarily use short answer questions for reviews, so having them work in groups is especially necessary to limit the number of responses you need to review in real time. Next, the first official question I have them answer is, what is your team name? I have them submit this on Reef using that 1-minute time limit. And from my personal experience, again, I believe this encourages a short-term group cohesiveness. That once they've taken that bit of time to create a group, to create a team name, they're in it together for the entirety of the activity. That being said, you want to review their team names as they are coming in, as occasionally you will see repeats. For example, every time you do any kind of group activity like this, you'll always have a team cat. You'll always have a team dog. You always have a team cat dog. That being said, you might get these team ones and team alphas, and multiple groups submit the same team name. You want to keep on top of that and make sure every group has their own name, just so that you can be able to call them out later and say, Team Alpha, you got points right. You got the answer right. Next, I have students list their identifying information of the group members. So at my university, we use ABC 123s as personal identifiers. So this is how we look at grade books. This integrates with all of our digital systems. So that being said, I will have Team Rabbit, for example, give me the individual's ABC 123s, as you can see in the example at the bottom. I primarily look at this to see who grouped with whom. That being said, it's not the most savvy way to cross-reference attendance or participation. So if you're using this as a grade for a participation grade, I highly encourage you've had some other activity for that day for them to be able to log in and participate, that every individual gets a grade. For this one, you will only have those people who are submitting their responses get a grade. So if you want to do the legwork and the detective work and figure out, okay, this individual participated, so I'm going to go and change in their grade as 100 for that day, that's fully up to you, but this is not the best way to go about it. Next, I have had this as feedback from my students. I need to tell them exactly how much each question is worth and how long they get. So when using iClicker to grade and keep track of points, it makes the most sense to keep all questions the same value. All questions are worth 5 points. And I make it very clear there's going to be 1-minute countdowns with no exceptions. If you see at the bottom, I put the top of the board is easiest, the bottom is hardest. And this is reference to the game board. So for the game board themselves, I attempt to make them as colorful as possible, with categories that students will generally be intrigued by and should have some expectation of what it will mean. That being said, a lot of the times I'm just in a punny mood and I like to make the weakest, stupidest joke possible just to see if they know what to expect when they make that request for that topic. So this is one of the game boards I have used this semester for my Introduction to Biological Anthropology course. And you can see I have all of these kinds of words like subdisciplinary, chains, canceled, mixed up, Spider-Man. Spider-Man having to do with the mutations question. And I have a couple of examples coming up. For example, Knucklehead led to this question. List 3 differences between human male and female craniums. Or if they chose milk, their question would be, which chromosome does the milk mutation occur on? So again, these are just awkward puns that I like to put together when I'm designing the game board, just so that I get a little bit of enjoyment and they get always a little bit of surprise on what they're about to answer. Occasionally, I also do target questions, and it will look something like this. On this map, identify where the Gigantopithecus once lived. So they will have chosen a question. This is what comes up on the PowerPoint, and this is what they're going to answer on their phones. So this is what it looks like on my screen while I am playing a game with my students. As you can see, there's kind of a lot of moving parts. I tend to do this in presenter view, so I have a full screen where I can look at responses and see how students are participating, while the students are having a full screen to themselves of just the question. So you see for this question was define the species concept. And you can see on below question 6, I have group Homin responding with an answer. Group Prime. I have someone who didn't put a group name, and they're not going to be able to get me to say, hey, this person, you got the right answer. That's just not practical. That doesn't mean that you get the option of, am I going to give this team points at all if they don't give me a team name? Depending on my mood, I kind of go back and forth on that. I also have responses from Team Squid, Team Alpha, and Team Name, which also tends to be a common one, but not the most common. So after a poll quote.
Sorry, Ray, I didn't want to interrupt your flow there. We do have a question about the game board.
Yeah.
Did you create that? Is that a PowerPoint slide?
This is all done in PowerPoint, and I created this myself. So
okay, thank you.
It takes only about 30 minutes to do something like this. You just have to be kind of savvy at PowerPoint in the first place to know what to expect. So after the timer runs out, I grade in real time. So once I've gotten the responses, I start clicking and saying this team got the right answer. So this was for another question, not the one preceding us just now. And I can say the question was compare a precision grip and a power grip. And I can look at the responses right after they've come in and say, Team Cross, you got the points. Team Zookeepers, you got points. Team Starbucks, you got points. So I click them off, go through as many as, I go through all of them, and then we go to the next question. So this is what students will see afterwards. So they have responded in real time. They will have normal Reef system where they see the screen if you share that with them or not, and they will respond. And I think this is important because it gives them instant feedback and points. So especially using the best answer tool that comes with short answers now in the iClicker, I can say this one is going to be the best answer for this question. So students afterwards will be able to review and see the question, see what their answer was, and see what the correct answer was using the best answer protocol. Finally, one of the important things I found is you have to have a winner. And declaring the winner can be probably the more difficult part of all this process. So to see which team got the most points during an activity or after an activity, you tend to have to close the session and export it to identify which individual got the most points and relate it to their team. This is kind of a clunky solution, but it's one that I find really meaningful. That being said, I have done it in the past and found this to be useful, is to say I will announce the winners the next day. So I can review it, make sure I did everything right, I graded everything correctly in between that class day and the next class day, and I'll come back say, Team Squid, you won. Good job. I also tend to give them some kind of prize for the entire class. So Team Squid will get to choose, 5 points on a quiz or 1 free 100 on a homework grade. So that winning group gets to choose the prize, but the whole class gets it. So from what I've taught to students and how they responded to this, the main thing I will say is students get very, very competitive. Even if they know the prize is small, even if they know the entire class is going to join in on that prize, they still want to win. They still want to be in that best group. I have noticed that they will walk all across the classroom and find a group that they think will win, just because they want the ability to say they won the activity. If they want to look at their feedback afterwards and see the best answers, they want their group to be the most common group on that best answer choice. So they can just brag about that to themselves. So competition tends to be a huge part of this.
Ray, there's a question. How large are the groups? Is it a pair? Is it 4 kids, 5 kids? And is there an optimal size that you've discovered through this?
So when I'm doing groups, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail in my suggestions, I tend to limit it at 5. That being said, I tend to teach classes ranging from 75 to 200 students. And with that kind of system, 5 for the most part, you can still get everyone in a 200-person class participating. But if you have 30 or 40 and you're willing to, if you believe you're able to review answers quickly for a group activity, then yeah, you could definitely do 2 or 3 people in a group.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So when it comes to student response, the main thing for me tends to be competition. They love to compete against each other, even though they know the stakes are minimal. It also, every time I've said, let's just do a game today. And again, for them, it's a treat, but for me, it took planning. But I always get a positive response. I always get clapping, which surprises me. And I always get them very happy to participate. They're not going to be as happy as if you were giving them a video day by any means, but they're always happy that it's something a bit different. So finally, I have some suggestions and best practices. And the first thing we talk about is what type of questions is most appropriate to ask. So I think when you're using the Reef app, all question types are possible. For the iClicker 2 remote, I say for ease, you probably want to try to stick to multiple choice or numbers. I know the iClicker 2 is able to do short answers to a limited number of characters, but people like to type. People like long responses, especially students. They've learned how to put a lot of information in 140 characters. So if you're going to give a short answer response, you don't want to limit them by any means. That being said, the other consideration you need to make when you're looking at what kind of question to ask is, do you want to be doing this in groups or pairs or individually? If you're doing this in groups, if you're doing this in pairs, again, I do believe all question types are possible, but I personally recommend you integrate more short answer questions. I have found that, especially because this engages parts of critical thinking and even some instant recall, just to have to remember something they did weeks behind us, short answer gets them to do a lot more work to try to find that right answer. They do more discussion to agree on what that answer is, versus a multiple choice question where it's like, oh, it could be A or it could be C. If you're doing it individually, my recommendation is you do all question types except short answer. And if appropriate, try to integrate more variety. Giving them only multiple choice will get them to start disengaging a little more each question. But if you have a multiple choice question, then a number question, then a target question, that little mix gets them more active and more willing to participate with you. So some thoughts on the game board is that this is incredibly important for students to see. So it needs to be clearly visible for them to see the entire board, or however you're creating the setup. If you take 10 minutes ahead of time to do it on the chalkboard or something like that, that's great. It just needs to be clearly visible for them to participate in. So I personally recommend PowerPoints just because we're so used to it and they're so easy to kind of adapt and create our own. Or having something pre-printed and put it on the doc cam. So some places where I have found really effective templates to make these game boards and find or adapt them is technologic.wordpress.com. This is a Japanese ESL instructor who is very engaged in creating digital works for the classroom. And you'll find a wide variety of different types of game boards and innovations on how those games are created for PowerPoint. And even though they're meant for more like a K-12 ESL studies, they're very easy to adapt for your own purposes. I've also found rusnackcreative.com to be fairly interesting. They adapt game show formats for PowerPoint. They're all free and Creative Commons use. They're more intensive in that there's a lot more graphics, there's a lot more sounds. That being said, a lot of the time it's plug and chug on you just being able to fill in the blanks, put in your questions and the answers. That being said, if you're savvy with PowerPoint or you're just getting used to a little bit more, it's easy to create your own. The game board that I showed you earlier, it took me about 30 minutes to design and about 25 to 30 more minutes to add the questions for my students to see. I also believe it's important for the students to see the questions clearly, not to just be calling them out. So again, I do recommend these are clearly visible and either have them on the PowerPoint or the doc cam or write them on the chalkboard or so on, just so students are clearly able to see the question before they respond to it. Again, with PowerPoints and putting on a Word document or so on, you can transmit that image to your students using the Reef app, but there's always other options, and that does require you to be that much more ahead of time in your practice and your prep. But there's other ways to do it as long as students have a way to clearly see these questions. And this was a little bit more brief than I expected because I'm talking a little bit faster. But with that, that was my presentation. As a reminder, my name is Ray Villanueva. You can contact me at ray.villanueva@utsa.edu. I'm also not the most active at Twitter, but I always respond if I get a DM or a comment. And you can find me at AREYV or at rayvillanueva.com. So,
and now's a great time if any of you want to enter questions into either the chat or the questions area. Ray, I do have a question from someone. Have you ever caught students, because they're using their phones, trying to look up an answer? I know you limit the amount of time that they're able to respond, but is that an issue with kids trying to cheat the game?
The way the Reef app is designed, it takes a little bit more time than you would expect for them to close that app, open something else, do a search, and be able to respond in time. I mean, when it comes to cheating, it's never going to disappear. Students will always try to find some loophole or some way. That being said, I have found that having them work in groups mitigates this because it kind of acts as a social control. The other members don't want to be cheating, or it's very visible to the other groups that someone is cheating and they'll call it out when a consequence.
Got it. Yeah, I can see that. There is a question, and I can help with this if you would like, but someone would like a little more information about iClicker, what it can do and how it works. I think just some of the nuts and bolts about how you use it for this. How they answer questions, how you ask questions, that kind of thing.
Okay. Let me pull up one of my game boards and just kind of show it that way. So this is a game board that I used a couple of months ago for an exam review. And so I always start a day of starting from my objectives. And I show them this slide. This is the exercise we're doing for the day. Get into roughly teams of 5, choose your representative, only they are allowed to answer. And all teams that get the answers right will get the points. So this is what the students see. I always have them do the team name and their ABC 1, 2, 3s like I showed beforehand. So as far as like what the game board looks like, what they're seeing, this is what they'll see. And I tend to have students just call out a topic. You can tend to go, oh, team alpha, choose a topic, or you can call on students or something and so forth. And you just have them choose one. So I have the category round pegs. They choose that one, I click it, and they'll get something like this. Based on the Punnett square, how likely is the offspring to be homozygous recessive? So I'm looking for a percentage here for the most part. So what I do on iClicker on that side is, I'm gonna do this here. I have the settings created already before the activity. So my polling on scoring, it'll be a 0 for participation because I don't use participation. I'll have the correct responses set to 5. And I'll have my toolbar responding from countdown from 1 minute. And I hit save. So I have this open. This is what this might be like closer to what the presenter view has. So students will have this, will see this slide. All I do is set it to short answer, and I hit the play button. So students will respond during that minute. Hopefully, if they're participating, if they're caring, they'll be drawing a Punnett square to try to figure out the solution. They will submit it. And give me 1 second. I'm going to try to put my own example here. One second. So I submitted to myself because that's what we're going to do. Once the minute comes down, it'll automatically turn off. Very, very rarely will I hit the stop button before that minute is over, just because as many times as you tend to see people are wrapped up, there's always a couple more groups that could be getting it under the time limit at that last second. So this is going to come down to 0, and I'll be able to see the results. And I have team 1, and they put 0%. I believe that is wrong. So I will say team 1, you did not get points. But team 2, you got points for giving the right answer. So if they got it right, and again, this is not the correct answer, I would hit correct. They would get 5 points. I would close this. I'd go back to the main game board. And then I start us on the next topic. Does that answer the question?
Great, thanks. Yeah, and for those of you who aren't familiar with iClicker at all, I know this must be a little overwhelming, and we do have some, if you go to iClicker.com, if you ever want to sign up for a more general introduction to iClicker to learn some of the functionality and that kind of thing, you're welcome to do that. We give all sorts of different webinars and different presentations, and you can also just sign up for a demonstration, and somebody would be happy to help you with that. I know this must be a little overwhelming for people, introduced to it for the first time. Okay, I'm just checking for more questions. I thought I saw a hand raise. I can't unmute people, but if you want to type something in the chat or questions area, I can address it at that location. Let's see. All right, well, I'm not seeing new questions pop in, so if you want to hop off, you're welcome to do that. I'll hang on, and Ray, if you can hang on for a few minutes just to give people time. I know it's, there's always a delay between typing in questions and looking for those within the system, but otherwise we'll just click off in a couple minutes. And again, just want to thank Ray for a great presentation and sharing some interesting things that he does in class. We really appreciate your time and ideas. Someone did ask also, Ray, if you would mind sharing the slide deck. We'll send a follow-up email message to everyone who registered, and along with a link to the recording. But if you would be willing to share your slides, that would be something that we could add to that as well.
Yeah, I fully will be sending this PowerPoint in its entirety, and if you'd like, I can also attach one of the templates for the game boards I've created.
Okay, I do have another question that just popped in, and they're asking, does this maintain student focus?
Focus is a difficult question no matter what. I think as long as you do this sporadically, students will participate during the activity pretty closely. That they want to win. Honestly, it comes down to that competitiveness. You don't have to be giving them that like a winning group extra credit. You don't have to give them any actual prize. They just want to know they've won. And this surprises me every single time that it doesn't matter if there's a carrot at the end of the stick. They just want to know they've won. So in my personal experience, I've done these as a class-long activity for an exam review, and I've held their attention for all 75 minutes without a problem. That being said, it gets mixed up depending on the day itself.
And probably the groups, if they're able to self-select their group and they're with their buddy or whatever, that might also maybe make it a little more difficult.
I will say, even when they've not self-selected, once you get started, as long as you do this sporadically, this is like a once every couple of weeks kind of thing, they always want to be participating. They always want to win. And I've not seen a group that's not at least trying.
Well, I think it says a lot when they actually start to applaud when you say you're going to do it that day. I think that's great.
Yeah, that always surprises me too.
That's nice. All right. Well, I don't see any additional questions coming through, so I think I will end the webinar now, but you are welcome to reach out to either Ray, or if you have any more general questions, they can be asked on the iClicker.com website. So thanks again, everybody. We really appreciate your time and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.